The case took place in Slavic settlements of Novgorod in 807 to Fred. Slavic tribes could not agree with each other, and then the Council of Elders of Communities they decided to invite to rule the Scandinavian tribe led by Rurik and his family. They occupied the local estates and began to rule. Together with them came and their retinue, among whom were both ordinary settlers seeking an easier life on the shores of the Baltic, and experienced Vikings, over whose shoulders there were many bloody campaigns and raids. As a result of this resettlement in the Viking state has appeared on expenses of the land of Rus. Rurik was an ambitious ruler. His possessions he expanded more and more. They conquered tribes around themselves, conquered the unruly by fire and sword. Many of the Scandinavians accepted language and culture of Slavs, but Rurik did not want to dissolve among Slavs. His plan was that both peoples fused in each other. The gods of war and the gods of vast expenses gave birth to a new people, able to conquer the whole of their indomitable will. Scandinavians were warlike people, were formed in difficult environment of northern mountains and cold. Slavs were not weaklings, however still were closer to the nature and to each other and community. Rurik has decided at any cost to unite Slavs and Scandinavians around family Rurikovich. Then his retinue has begun to plant acceptance of each other, has ordered to the wars to marry Slavic women, to give birth to the general children, Russian prisoners of war accepted in cohorts of the army. In consequence, and they married Satrian women and gave birth to fragments of new culture. Rurik above all was the warrior and continued to study a craft of war and strategist. Expansion continued rapidly, but in order not to aggravate the situation and not to antagonize the Slavs, he decided not to fight the Russians until they ceased to be related to each other. So it was decided to capture the neighboring Estonian and Livonian tribes to increase the strength of the state. Respectively, the expansion went to the west, north. In the south lived Russians, therefore this direction has been limited. For assimilation, Rurik has married the senior son on the daughter of neighboring Princedom Minsk to connect both princedoms in uniform marriage union. When the time came, Rurik erected a new Viking kingdom, the Kingdom of Holmgarden, which the Russians called Novgorod. First of all, Rurik has hung up a banner of the dynasty in a throne room that all saw who they rule and to whom it is necessary to offer honor and praise. Recently captured banner of the neighboring Finno-Ugric tribe which lived in the land of Rurik by right. It has burned in front of eyes at the own and foreign soldiers that all saw that it the Uniku. At the same time Rurik's dynasty expanded. His wife and concubines gave birth to him children which stopped members of his sacred dynasty of warriors and conquerors. Unfortunately, the senior son Rurik has passed away. It was lost fighting in fight on a battlefield, whence it was taken away Valkyria and Valhalla. After this grim event, the Koning decided to choose his patron to guide in his path. He chose to honor Allur, the god of war and hunting. He gave titles to both Russian and Scandinavian warriors to become his vessels and give him a portion of the profits and warriors from their lands. It was necessary to fight much with different raiders coming almost from all extended border, that fellow countrymen from Scandinavia, that bandits from Finno-Ugric tribes. But Rurik was merciless unto those and others. Nobody was allowed to rob possessions of Rurik. Neighborhoods of possession Novgorod personal fiefdom of dynasty Rurikovich rapidly developed thanks to the increasing flow of money and talented people from all kingdom, and also wanderers who have come beyond its limits. Novgorod and other fiefdoms of the Koning developed. Warriors under Rurik became more and more. New ports, new markets and fairs. Gradually Novgorod became the new capital of this cold and unfriendly fragment of Europe. For Russians and Scandinavians it actually became one of the main centers of attraction. Its greatness was undisputed, although the Normans did not yet recognize its status as supreme. It attracted many nobles from the surrounding tribes, which led to the need to develop the royal court, increase the quarters, buy new clothes. At a choice of partners for the children, Rurik chose not among noble families and strong unions, but first of all physical qualities of husbands and wives. He chose the most beautiful, strong and clever to gradually strengthen his dynasty. It did not matter to him that it would reflect badly on the prestige of such marriages. It was important that his dynasty was strong in all aspects of life, including because of the innate superiority over the others. Over time, this became a tradition and self-worth for the dynasty, and so many outstanding people endowed the blood of his family with qualities that were manifested in the future even in those parents who were not distinguished in life. After the kingdom was confirmed, Rurik began to distribute and enlarge the possessions of his vassals. Thus was created the Principality of Luke and many other principalities in Jarlsvo, titles of which he distributed to faithful warriors to simplify the management of such a large state. The ambitions of Rurik were not directed only on Russia. As territories increase, the ratio of Northmen and Slavs was not in favor of the first. Slavic and Finno-Ugric tribes and communities adjoined rapidly. Northerners were lost in wars, and the new generation grew slowly. Besides, the initial stream of settlers decreased. Therefore, to solve this problem, the king decided to assert his authority in his homeland to increase the influx of colonists to continue expansion in the Russian lands and the fusion of the two cultures. The first thing the Vikings of Novgorod did was to establish their bridgehead on the island of Gotland, taking it from the tribe that had occupied it before. It was an excellent place for the passages of armies coming from Russia and back, a port where ships could stop for manning, stock up on supplies, and move on to the coast of Scandinavia. Further raids have already begun on the territory of the Norwegians in the Viking district. They did not yet have a formed kingdom. They were fragmented, so it was not difficult to seize power there. Appointed as his vassals in Scandinavia Russians from among those who had accepted a Sotru and swore allegiance to the new lord. The most significant and trusted person in Norway became Alisius, who has occupied Visneti's Viken. Expansion went rapidly, and already on the beginning of 10 centuries already the most part of Norway was under the control of viceroys of Rurik. But this was not enough for Rurik's ambitions, so he decided to unite all of Scandinavia under the banners of his kingdom before continuing his expansion southward. At some point, strong in this period, Sweden weakened. After its king died and his son ascended the throne, the kingdom was mired in internecine warfare, and so Rurik decided to launch an invasion, land on the coast of Uppland, and seize the oldest shrine in Scandinavia. The war ended quickly thanks to the joint efforts of the Russian and Varangian guards. In the same way, Rurik landed in Danish Sealand. This campaign lasted long enough and brutally. Rurik did not want to shed brotherly blood anymore, so he wanted to put an end to his claims. He declared war on the king of Sweden for the kingdom. This war was also not a walk. Not a few good warriors died in it, but it was necessary for the final unification of the Asatrians. After that, in conquests on the lands of Northerners, there was no need. Anyway, with the course of time, they will enter into a structure of new empire. Some already then have accepted vassal oath to King Rurik and his family. After these conquests began to arrive a huge quantity of young soldiers, settlers, adventurers, and also veterans who have past set of battles and wars, in order to master a new ground and to get to its self-glory. During all these conquests about Rurik has heard all people of Scandinavia. Each Asatrian knew his name. Thanks to this glory to Rurik began to flock wars even from the most distant tribes, which made him a legend among his people. The most experienced, most distinguished and significant warriors of the Northmen, who later founded their sacred order, Vikings, sailed to him. Their fortress was founded on the coast of the Neva Bay, right on the border with the Finns. It was a symbolic place that connected their homeland with their new home in Holmgarden. It was a bridge between two worlds, between the old and the new, between the past and the future of the Nordic race. Rurik, on whose possessions the fortress of the Vikings was founded, became the patron of the arts, and father of the new order. After these events, the union of the peoples was not far off. The Northmen were no longer a drop in the sea of Slavs. In many territories they achieved parity, and in some they dominated the ratio, which accelerated the process of acceptance of each other. So many warriors and heroes he took to himself. They did not mind to do it voluntarily. In the fight with his army they entered only out of military honor and duty to the Lord, so the recruitment took place basically independently, because the duty of a warrior they had already paid in blood, and to serve under the greatest of the Scandinavians was an honor for them. However, he could not forgive the raiders who robbed his new domain, as well as those who had been involved in it earlier, and punished them severely. Finally, after so long, Rurik managed to unite the Northmen and Russians around the Novgorod dynasty. The Vikings from Scandinavia and the Slavs became related peoples, at least in his domain. Many were already bound by marriage and produced mixed children, whose families observed the traditions of both peoples, told each other myths that included tales of titans and Slavic fairy tales, called their children Russian and Scandinavian names, and honored Odin and Brun as one god. As a result, they adopted the culture of warriors, as the nature of Novgorod itself and the history of its formation was imbued with military valor. Many coastal Russians became Vikings and participated in both raids and conquests of Rurik, applied Norse tattoos on themselves, but the language for the most part became Slavic, with the inclusion of many Scandinavian words and dialects. Customs and traditions remained largely Scandinavian, but the tradition of the Druzina became a full-fledged part of this culture, on a par with the Huskarls and Vikings. While the Druzina, gathered from noble clans and families, fully covered in armor, fought head-on in the fields, the Vikings raided the rear and cut into enemy ranks with the fury of berserkers. But even Huskarls and Bons adopted the look of Slavs, adopted clothes and equipment. The settlement was still built as it was in the homeland of the Scandinavians, with their large halls and halls, the beautiful ornaments of the Russians. So far, the new culture spread only in Novgorod, and a little beyond its borders, but it was gaining momentum, and in the coming years the merger of these peoples occurred in most other regions in the neighborhood, so the full integration of each other was only a matter of time. Warriors from Russians and Northmen still argued and conflicted with each other, and all their differences were offered to be solved in a fight at a ting. The retinue and Russian vessels did not want war with the southern princedom of Minsk. So many of them originated from it and had relatives and close ones in the princedom, especially that at that moment they possessed strong alliances, and probably, a little later, it will submit, but certainly not now. However, for formation of the new Russian Scandinavian state was necessary Kiev. It is the second most important city in Russia, especially since besides the Russians it was also of great importance to the Scandinavians. Even earlier, when Rurik has not sat on a throne of Novgorod, on the grounds not yet based, Kiev have arrived as Scandinavia with the Vikings, having introduced Sui dynasty from the noble sword ascending to Ragnar Lodbrok. In territory Rus already some centuries past, tradeway from Varangians to Greeks as it was named at Rus and Byzantines, tradeways and trading flotillas, running straight from Scandinavia to Byzantium and back past on large navigable rivers Rus, and consequently this land was interested as Scandinavians and Byzantines, and various neighboring tribes which either hunted on the vessels going on these ways, or became mercenaries for their protection. The Northmen founded many fortresses on these rivers to ensure the safety of the ships, to take from them a fee, to hire them as guards and to trade with them. Scandinavia were just the ones who came to these lands to establish a new fortress, which passed along this trade route, and so Kiev appeared. Unfortunately, the brothers quickly assimilated. They did not consider themselves neither Scandinavians nor Satrians. Therefore, in addition to the growing need to unite the major centers of the Slavs to strengthen the state, there was also the return of this fortress under the control of the Satrians. In order not to conflict with the southern neighbor, Rurik has decided to begin invasion in Utsin, on territory of nomads. Large army Rurik began to collect at a channel of the river Dnapr and to immerse in vessels, to sail on it and to invade to the south from coasts of the Black Sea. On a way nobody has dared to interfere and to take a tribute from Army Rurik, and they without problems have sailed to the sea where have landed and at once have imposed battle approaching to coast nomads. They could not resist an onslaught of northern legions and have been compelled to submit. However, further advancement on the steppe was hindered by the giant empire of the Khazars. They prevented such a rapid aggressive expansion, so the great host was forced to wage war with a huge horde of steppe nomads, exceeding in numbers even the expedition of Novgorod. But their armies, even with the help of allies Magyars from Hungary, also recently migrated steppe people, could not resist the experienced warriors, Vikings and vigilantes. The battle took place in the territories already occupied by the Northmen, and their onslaught fell on the prepared fortress, where their cavalry was defeated with the help of military cunning and fortifications, generously dotted with stakes. Khazars were forced to stop the bloodshed and cede the land to Rurik. Already nothing kept the armies of the Tsar from the campaign against Kiev, and the armies were already gathered near its borders. To prepare for the invasion of Kiev, the army was assisted by sympathizers, those descendants of northerners who refused to accept the new way of life and culture and assimilation. They helped negotiate with the locals, made maps, delivered new intelligence and information about the area. In this expedition, all warriors were involved. Rurik even called for the help of his order of John's Vikings for subjugation of Kiev, as it was their sacred duty. The Vikings besieged the surrounding fortresses for quite a long time, and when the Kievers gathered their army, the armies of both great generals clashed in battle, with the Novgorodians emerging victorious. Kiev was compelled to submit and to recognize Rurik's authority in this land that has marked a great epoch for the Rus-Norse kingdom. To rule the southern lands, Rurik placed his youngest son Einar on the throne of Kiev to broadcast the will of his father, but he did not rule for long. His son's vassals, who inherited him from the past masters, revolted, during which they imprisoned him and killed him. Rurik could not legally punish murderers of the son because on laws of those years affairs of vassals suzerain do not concern, and Rurik could not influence its outcome. But to let this situation was impossible. Revenge was fast, and the murder of his son has already soon rested, but the throne of Kiev was occupied by his son, the son of the murderer. By the act, the father of this family has doomed on them the big trouble. Dynasty Rurik will not forget such sacrilege. While their sword is cursed, and they 100 times will regret about happened. During one of battles, other son, but already the senior, has lost. It was a serious blow for the head of a dynasty, and it realized that in the near future, and it will go following in Valhalla for the sons, to life it remained not long. But he did not want to die in a warm bed. He wanted to die as a warrior, to join his sons to the eternal feast with the gods, fighting side by side with his family. But lastly, he wanted to settle the affairs of the state before handing over his crown to his heir. He went hunting with his vessels in Scandinavia. Of course, this was not just a hunting trip, but above all a meeting with the Guardians of the North, where he could assure their loyalty to his descendants. And while his council continued to deal with affairs of state, the armies expanded their possessions around Kiev. Large titles were given to the most trusted subjects in the north. The idea of uniting Slavs and Northmen spread across the continent and had already captured Kiev, so in a few years a large community of Slavs and Norskians was formed there. Also, shortly before departure on the north, Rurik has arranged royal reception, thinking that it already can and cannot be. It accepted subjects one by one, listening to each request and complaints. His dynasty continued to expand. Grandchildren and nephews were born, names which he gave himself in honor of his great heritage. The rebels continued to sabotage and rebel, but they were so weak that no one took them seriously anymore. To prepare for departure, the king hired an experienced ship captain and a forester to accompany him to and from the hunting grounds. Everything went without any incidents. Sometimes there were some unexpected nuances, but in general everything was smooth. To a place of destination Rurik has reached rather quickly. where already were present his vassals who have invited it on this event. Rurik could already feel the breath of death on the back of his neck. It was already hard for him to move in the cold forests. He felt his body stiffen. He felt that his strength was not what it used to be. He was worried that he might never reach home, where he could say goodbye to his family and friends. He enjoyed the last days of his life, picking flowers, contemplating the beauty of nature around him. Rurik was already beginning to forget what he had done last week and had to do next week. His days were numbered. They finally drove the wolf, but the prey went to one of his young jarls. The king hurried back home as quickly as possible. Power in one of the neighboring principalities was seized by an adventurous Crusader from Scandinavia. Rurik sent him a small gift as a token of his victory. Jarl Krolf was grateful and fastened on loyalty to the great warrior, conqueror and his family on arrival of the king home. At last he could go on his last campaign, where he longed to end his life at the point of cold steel. Rurik declared war on the southern principality of Minsk in order to connect the northern and southern domains by land. At least that is how he justified this expedition. In one of the Alsace near Vitebsk, the king, together with his soldiers, went to storm one of the breaches, but never reached the gates of the fortress. His heart failed and stopped under the rumbling, screaming and clanking of iron. He did not die at the hands of another warrior, but died in battle, died in arms, like a true warrior and a great king.